She built a broadcasting empire that reached over 2 billion homes. She buried her husband on live television and then walked back to the anchor desk the very next day. She survived grief that would have broken most people, and then, without a single warning, she was gone. This is the story the world needs to hear. There are people who leave a mark on an institution, and then there are people who are the institution. Joni Lamb was the second kind. Born Joni Trammell on July 19, 1960, in Greenville, South Carolina, she grew up in a family rooted in deep Pentecostal faith. Her family attended Tremont Avenue Church of God, the same congregation where a young traveling preacher named Marcus Lamb came to hold a revival when Joni was still a teenager. That encounter would set the course of the rest of her life. Within 2 years, in 1982, Joni and Marcus were married, and almost immediately they began traveling together as evangelists, carrying a shared vision that was far larger than either of them could have built alone. In 1984, the couple relocated to Montgomery, Alabama, where they purchased a full-power television station and began teaching the Bible on broadcast television, something that felt almost impossibly ambitious for two young evangelists still in their 20s. Within 6 years, they had outgrown that platform entirely. By 1990, they had moved to Dallas, Texas, and by 1993, Marcus and Joni had formally co-founded what the world would come to know as the Daystar television network, headquartered in Bedford, Texas, in the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. The network officially launched on New Year's Eve 1997, and its growth from that point forward was nothing short of extraordinary. From a single Alabama station, Daystar expanded until it was carried on every major cable provider, on satellite, and eventually claimed a reach of over 2.3 billion homes worldwide, placing it among the largest faith-based broadcasting operations on the planet. In 2006, it became the first foreign Christian broadcaster to receive a license from the Israeli government, a milestone that said everything about the scale of what Marcus and Joni had built together. Joni was never a background figure in any of this. She served as co-founder, executive producer, and primary host, a creative force whose signature program earned the National Religious Broadcaster's Best Television Talk Show Award in 2004, accumulated 10 Telly Awards, 3 Lone Star Emmy Awards, 6 additional Emmy nominations, and 5 Daytime Emmy nominations. She was, by any measure, one of the most decorated women in the history of Christian broadcasting. But the awards were never really the point. The point was the connection, the millions of viewers who woke up with her program as part of their daily rhythm, who felt, over years of watching, that they genuinely knew her. Then, on November 30, 2021, the ground beneath everything shifted. Marcus Lamb, the co-founder of the network, her husband of nearly 4 decades, the only partner she had ever known in ministry, died at the age of 64 from complications of COVID-19. He had been a fierce public critic of COVID-19 vaccines during the pandemic and advocated loudly for alternative treatments. When he contracted the virus and did not survive it, the story made national headlines. Joni announced his death to the network's audience personally, through a live Facebook stream, in a moment of raw and unfiltered grief that millions of people witnessed in real time. The loss was shattering. In a single morning, Joni Lamb became not only a widow, but the sole steward of a global ministry she had spent 4 decades building beside her closest companion. Rather than step back, she stepped forward. She assumed the role of network president and returned to daily live broadcasting, continuing to host the network's flagship morning program 5 days a week, carrying the weight of both leadership and grief simultaneously. For the people who watched her do it, that act of perseverance became its own kind of testimony. Less than 2 years later, on June 10, 2023, Joni remarried. Her new husband was Dr. Doug Weiss, a Colorado Springs-based psychologist and author specializing in addiction and recovery, who had appeared as a guest on the network and quickly became her co-host on the daily broadcast. The remarriage was not without controversy. Her son, Jonathan Lamb, publicly opposed the union, arguing on theological grounds that Weiss had not divorced his previous wife on scriptural terms. That disagreement deepened over the months that followed, eventually escalating into a painful and very public family rupture. Jonathan and his wife, Susie, accused Joni of covering up alleged abuse involving their young daughter, allegations Joni categorically denied. Jonathan was ultimately removed from the network in November 2024. A Texas police investigation into the underlying abuse allegations was closed in May 2025 due to insufficient evidence. Through all of it, Joni kept broadcasting. The ministry kept moving. But the personal cost of those years, grief, remarriage, family estrangement, public scrutiny, was a burden no camera could fully capture. Which is exactly what made her sudden disappearance from the screen so alarming to the millions of viewers who had watched her through all of it. Without advance notice of any kind, Joni Lamb stopped appearing on her own program. No ticker announcement. No formal explanation. Just absence. And the particular kind of dread that absence creates in an audience that had come to rely on her presence as a constant. Viewers took to social media by the tens of thousands, asking questions, sharing concern, and in many cases, fearing the worst. The network's initial public response lasted roughly 50 seconds on air and satisfied almost no one. Then Dr. Doug Weiss addressed the situation directly in a broadcast announcement. He revealed that Joni had suffered a back injury resulting in 2 hairline fractures in her spine, specifically at the T11 and L1 vertebrae. He asked viewers for their prayers, described the recovery as requiring real-time and genuine rest, and asked the audience to be patient. For anyone familiar with spinal anatomy, the mention of T11 and L1 carried immediate medical weight. The T11 vertebra sits near the lower end of the thoracic spine, the mid-back region anchored to the rib cage, while L1 is the first vertebra of the lumbar spine, where the lower back begins. The junction between these 2 regions is one of the most mechanically vulnerable zones in the entire vertebral column. According to peer-reviewed literature cited by the American Association of Neurological Surgeons, approximately 60 to 75% of all vertebral compression fractures occur at or near this exact transitional zone, precisely because the relative stiffness of the thoracic spine meets the greater flexibility of the lumbar spine, creating a concentrated point of mechanical stress. The Cleveland Clinic describes vertebral compression fractures as breaks or cracks in the vertebrae that cause significant pain and restricted movement, with healing timelines that can range from several weeks to several months depending on severity, bone density, and the specifics of treatment. Conservative care typically involves activity restriction, back bracing, careful pain management, and eventually supervised physical therapy, with minimally invasive procedures such as vertebroplasty or balloon kyphoplasty available for cases where conservative measures prove insufficient. These injuries are real, they are medically serious, and they demand genuine stillness from people whose lives have been built around constant motion. But for Joni Lamb, the spinal fractures were not the whole story. In its official statement confirming her death, Daystar's leadership disclosed that prior to the back injury, Joni had been privately battling serious health issues that she had chosen to face without public disclosure, consistent with how she had handled so much of her personal life over the preceding years, quietly carrying things that only those closest to her fully understood. The back injury, her family and the network confirmed, compounded those existing challenges and led to a medical situation far more serious than anyone around her had anticipated. Despite the care of her medical team and the prayers of viewers around the world, her condition worsened in her final days. On the morning of Thursday, May 7, 2026, Joni Lamb, co-founder, executive producer, broadcaster, widow, mother, and grandmother, passed away at the age of 65. She was at home in Bedford, Texas. The Daystar Board of Directors confirmed her passing with a statement that read, in part, "Joni's love for the Lord and for the people we serve shaped this ministry from the beginning. We grieve her loss. We are grateful for the legacy of faith she leaves behind." She is survived by her children, Jonathan, Rachel, and Rebecca, and by grandchildren who had grown up on the edges of the broadcasts she gave her life to. A network executive leadership team, which Joni herself had put in place, has confirmed that programming will continue. On-air tributes are expected in the coming days, and the ministry she built from a single Alabama station continues to operate across the globe. There is a particular kind of life that is impossible to fully appreciate until it is over. Joni Lamb spent more than 4 decades broadcasting her faith to the world, not as an untouchable figure on a pedestal, but as a woman who grieved publicly, loved publicly, made difficult decisions publicly, and kept showing up through all of it. She endured the loss of her first husband on live television. She navigated a painful family estrangement in full view of millions. She faced serious illness privately, with a quiet dignity she had always reserved for her most personal battles. And in the end, her body, which had carried the weight of so much ministry for so long, finally asked for what it had always deserved: rest. The flood of grief that poured across social media in the hours after her passing was not simply the reaction of television viewers losing a familiar face. It was the response of people who had let her into their mornings, their kitchens, their lives. It was the sound of millions of people losing someone they felt, genuinely, that they knew. And perhaps that is the most enduring measure of what she built. Not the awards, not the satellite footprint, not the broadcast license from a foreign government, but the fact that when she left, so many people around the world paused what they were doing and said simply, thank you. Heal well, Joni. You've more than earned it.